Top 10 Most Notorious and Deadliest Hitmen. Nowadays, there are movies, books and even TV shows showcasing the Mafia. They all try to take a deeper look at the organized crime lifestyle, and the popularity of these types of entertainment is only growing. If the mob puts a contract out on your head, these are the last guys you would want coming after you. But why do these men and some women join a group like this? How did it all begin? For this list, we'll be taking a look at the most prolific hitmen of all time from all corners of the globe, from Giovanni Brusca to Joseph Barboza. In today's episode, we are counting down the real-life hitmen with the most kills, the top 10 deadliest hitmen. Number 10. Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss. Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss was another Murder Incorporated's member. He was easily the organization's most violent member. Some say he has murdered between 50 to 100 people. Strauss was arrested 18 times but never convicted until the downfall of Murder Incorporated in 1940. During the trial, his attempted insanity plea failed, and he was executed in 1941 by electric chair. Number 9. Salvatore Sammy Gravano. Salvatore Sammy Gravano worked his way up from petty theft and street fighting to become Joe Colombo's protege in the 1960s. He was determined to impress his boss, committing several brutal murders which earned him respect. He soon got too big to be a number 2, so he set up a trucking and underground smuggling business, and it turns out he was quite the businessman. Before long, he turned into a multi-millionaire. The good times didn't last though. When the police came knocking, Gravano sold out his business partner. Despite Gravano's involvement in at least 19 murders, in 1994 the state sentenced him to just 5 years in prison. He literally got away with murder. Number 8. Roy DeMeo. A hardened gangster and the leader of the DeMeo crew, a gang of contracted killers during the 1970s and early 80s. Roy DeMeo was a career killer for the Gambino crime family. Between 1973 to 1983, he and his associates murdered between 150 and 200 people, mainly using what some call the Gemini method. He would lure folks to the Gemini lounge, where one member would shoot them in the head with a silenced pistol, while another would immediately wrap a towel around their head to stop the blood. DeMeo would then stab them in the heart to stop blood flow to the head. Next, they would be hung in the bathroom until they completely bled out, and then their bodies were sent to the Brooklyn dump. He created this method as an easy way to clean up bodies. Because of how well his method worked, the FBI only found a portion of his victims' bodies. Once they were onto him, DeMeo himself was eventually discovered dead in the trunk of his car in 1982, having been shot multiple times in the head by a fellow member. Number 7. Thomas Tommy Karate Pitera. Thomas Tommy Karate Pitera was a hitman for the Bonanno crime family in the 1980s. Thomas Tommy Karate Pitera was a ruthless killer, infamous for his martial arts skills, and that's why his name is what it is. Some say he has killed over 60 people throughout his Mafia career. He killed to keep trophies like jewelry and clothing from each of his victims, something that is not typical for a Mafia member. Pitera was a methodical killer who studied dissection and made use of his special toolkits to dismember the bodies of his victims. A psychopath who displayed behaviors more typical of a serial killer than a mobster, Tommy Karate was eventually found guilty of 6 murders and several drug charges, which led to his being sentenced to life in prison in 1992. He remains in a correctional facility in Pennsylvania. Number 6. Joseph the Animal Barboza. So vicious that he was rumored to have beaten part of a man's cheek off, Joseph Barboza's nickname the Animal was well deserved. A contract killer for the patriarchal crime family, Barboza was allegedly responsible for 26 murders over the course of his criminal career. He was well known for being a great chef and even graduated from a French cooking school, but by his mid-20s, Barboza was heavily involved in the New England Mafia. He earned his nickname the Animal in an alliteration that sounds like a scene out of Goodfellas. While drinking one night, he was told to keep it down by an elderly man. Barboza slapped the man and his boss warned him to never touch an elderly person with his hands again. Barboza did the unthinkable and bit his ear off and took a chunk out of his cheek. He was arrested but only served a year in prison after he gave police information on other mafia members. These men have not learned that it's best not to snitch apparently, because he was found dead outside his house with 4 shotgun holes in his chest while walking to his car in 1976. Number 5. Frank the Dasher, Abbandando. A member of the notorious gang of killers called Murder Incorporated, Frank the Dasher Abbandando was a ruthless New York-based hitman who is said to be responsible for up to 30 murders, but most likely many more. He killed most of his victims by stabbing them in the chest with an ice pick, but he wasn't afraid to use other objects as well. He was arrested in May 1940, but he failed to grasp the severity of the situation. At one point, he even whispered a threat into the judge's ear. Abbandando also worked with a meat cleaver on occasion. Abbandando worked alongside Abbey Kid Twist, Reles to eliminate rival gangs in 1930s Manhattan, and reportedly was also a serial rapist. Abbandando didn't know that Abbey Reles was on the other end helping the police. Unfortunately for Abbandando, the law eventually caught up to the Dasher and he was given the death penalty by electric chair in 1942. Number 4. Sam Madsam DeStefano. Sam Madsam DeStefano began his career as a petty criminal and enforcer, but it wasn't long before he joined Chicago's notorious 42 gang in 1930. A few years later, he would become one of the city's first loan sharks. He was the definition of a gangster, as he would lend money to vulnerable clients like drug addicts and the needy. When they failed to pay up on time, he would take them to a soundproof chamber in his basement and sadistically torture them until they died. He took real pleasure in killing his victims. Some say he even foamed at the mouth during his killings. He was arrested for murder, but his associate killed him before justice could be served in front of a judge. Number 3. Giovanni the Pig Brusca. A modern-day Italian mafia hitman, Giovanni Brusca was a sadistic murderer, a Sicilian gangster who claimed to have killed 200 people during his bloody career. He was nicknamed the Pig for his unkempt appearance and savage behavior. In addition to killing Italian prosecutor Giovanni Falcone in 1992, Brusca is especially notorious for kidnapping, torturing and murdering a police informant who was just 11 years old. He was finally arrested after killing a magistrate court and his wife, as well as 2 bodyguards in a brutal attack. He gained special privileges by acting as a police informant and wreaked the wrath of Italy by claiming that ex-Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi paid the mafia. The Pig is not a very bright man, to say the least. He also helped orchestrate a series of terrorist attacks against the Italian government in retribution for their crackdown on organized crime. Nicknamed the Pig because of his portly and disheveled appearance, Brusca was finally captured by law enforcement officers in 1996 and was subsequently sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. Abbey Kid Twist Reles. Abbey Reles was a natural-born killer. He was a violent and unpredictable man and also a member of Murder Incorporated. This was a notorious enforcement arm of the American and Jewish Mafia, believed to have viciously murdered up to 1,000 people in the 1930s and 1940s. Reles was known for using an ice pick on his victims, which would ram into their brains through their ears. He was angry and used murder as a solution for his anger, murdering a parking lot employee for not bringing his car quick enough. He escaped the death penalty by giving information about fellow high-ranking Murder Incorporated personnel to the corps, but then it didn't go down so well. People in the Mafia aren't a fan of snitches, and Reles was found dead on the pavement outside his hotel in 1941. Before we unveil our top pick, here are some honorable mentions: Charles Harrison, Giuseppe Greco, Alexander Salonik, and John Salise. Number 1. Richard the Iceman, Kuklinksi. Few hitmen inspired the same kind of fear that the Iceman did. Physically imposing, Richard Kuklinski's career spanned decades, during which time he devised myriad ways to kill his reportedly hundreds of victims. In fact, he is one of the most prolific contract killers to ever work for the Mafia. Incredibly, he claimed to have committed over 250 murders. He was known to kill homeless people for no reason, but rather to practice different murder techniques, using human beings like lab rats. He earned the nickname of the Iceman because he would often freeze the bodies of his victims to confuse the police about their time of death. He made use of guns, knives, cyanide, tire irons, and his bare hands to dispatch his targets in ferocious fashion while working for the so-called Five Families of New York. Even more noteworthy is the fact that he was able to hide his true occupation from his family for years. His crimes caught up with him in 1986 when he was sentenced to several consecutive life sentences. After several candid HBO interviews, Kuklinksi died in 2006 from a rare disease. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that criminals and awful people like this exist. It also amazes me how many of them got away with some of their brutal murders. These men are absolutely scary, dangerous, and not afraid of anything, even if it means severe consequences. The men of the Mafia are not the ones to mess with, that is for sure.
Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more videos on crime stories, notorious outlaws, and historical scandals.